Hello, hello. My name is April Malone, and I'm with Yes, I Work From Home, and this is the podcast. Today I have Jonas Altman from Vancouver with us. He describes himself as a workologist, and I was intrigued, and so I brought him in today, and here we go. Are you ready, Jonas? What is workology?
I'm ready. Hi, April. Um, well, people know about anthropology and they know about sociology and lots of other words that end with a Y. Um, there's a there's actually a New York Times long running column that no longer runs, and it was called The Workologist. And
Oh.
I didn't know that, but it was basically it is around the study of work and
Mm-hmm.
looking at work from with an anthropological lens as a sort of experiment of how do we put humans in an office, or how do we do work that the world needs versus um, toil and drudgery, which is what
Hmm.
work was once, and in many ways was a first class ticket to heaven. And since the shift to, and you know a lot about this, of working from home and not having maybe healthy boundaries, it's all for the last 20, 30 plus years been about productivity, focus, and outcomes. And it seems like that's uh, somehow integral to our way of living and our sense of self, which is great, except for if it's not a healthy balance. So I believe that
Right. So
the
get the
study of
most bang from your buck.
for sure. So I believe that the study of work is really about seeing how we can unleash the human spirit and make work more of a human endeavor versus a mechanistic sort of units and widgets kind of industrial model.
Right. When you're saying that, I'm thinking like the factories where they're always trying to increase that productivity and the final outcome, where now we're working in so many creative spaces where you have to have that balance to be able to think clearly and to come up with new stuff.
Exactly. Precisely.
So just to address this, for those of us, for those of our listeners who are watching today, I have Jonas an audio only today, and we just had a conversation about that. He said he's in a small town, his Wi-Fi isn't great, but there's some other reasons why sometimes it's nice to just listen and talk. Can you expound on that a little bit, Jonas?
Sure. I mean, to that point around our currency in, say, advanced economies in the Western world is often our ideas and the mush between our ears, our brain.
Yeah.
And so we're looking for ways to optimize or squeeze out as much as we can. And so what we have, and what everyone has been talking about for 6, 7 months about Zoom fatigue, is spending a lot of time on a screen in addition to the regular screen time, whether it's Netflix or TV or email or their smartphone. And now, instead of being in a room with people, syncing to their breath and having your irises sync, you're sort of looking at a screen trying to make sense and decode what that person is doing. So when you turn off the audio, when you turn off the video,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's for a conversation with a friend and you choose to call instead of doing a FaceTime,
Mm-hmm.
or it's a meeting and instead of accepting the Zoom invite, you say, "Hey, I'm actually going to be for a walk with my dog. Do you mind if we just do a regular call?" You actually switch the energy. So imagine driving with your husband in the car, having a conversation about the kids when your profiles are looking, you're not looking directly at each other, but you're both looking at the
Mm-hmm.
road, versus a long day. You come down, you plop down, and you're sitting across from each other. The energy between that conversation will be different just by
Mm-hmm.
the way that you're not really looking directly at each other. So my
Mm-hmm.
preference for many conversations as of late has been to default to either audio and walking, because I enjoy walking, as do many other people.
Yeah, good. Yeah, and like we were just talking about, like how do people like to consume podcasts? So, well, I consume podcasts usually with audio only. If I'm like soaking in the tub, or like my husband is often listening to them as he's like cleaning the kitchen, which, by the way, my husband is awesome, and he usually cleans the kitchen more than I do when cooking. And I'm more likely to listen to them, like, if I'm going for a walk. That's kind of a very peaceful time.
Right.
And just to be safe, you can't always have video on, because then you're so, like you said, you use your brain in a different way, and then I would be more likely to be in an accident or a trip or something like that. So I actually teach English, and one of the companies that I work for, it's always video, and if the kids' video isn't working, they're not allowed to have class. Like, the teacher is expected to be able to see their lips moving at all times to help them with their pronunciation, enunciation, all that. Well, when I work with adults, it's different. They actually don't even have the capability of having the camera on at all. And people are like, how can I teach like that? I need to be able to see their lips. And I thought, you know what? It's kind of like a conference call. You can actually listen, and understand. You just have to listen in a different way with focus. And honestly, a lot of these busy adults are like cooking or taking care of kids, and it would just be distracting to me, or especially if we're in a group lesson with 6 cameras on. Like, I had a lady confess to me one time that she was driving as she was taking her class, and I was like,
yes.
Maybe that wasn't the safe choice,
Well, I think there's definitely something there around the art and skill of listening and listening well. And I think, including myself, we aren't really we don't really value the ability to hear people. And that's all that people are doing when they're talking, is hear me, see me, love me. So if you can get more power, and you can have people adapt to a learning style that is focused on the breath and the word and the pause, that's beautiful. And if it's very important to see the lips, and the environment is going to be much more beneficial and impactful from a learning point of view, to have, your energy, whether it's on a screen or in a room, I think that's very important. And then the other thing is, as I close my eyes, I remember this research that talks about the brain blink, and the studies of people in showers or in baths have their eyes or their vision encumbered and aren't really seeing as well. So they're actually very much like, say, a blind person, amplifying their other faculties, which is why you get all these bolts of inspiration. So, some people shower
Eureka!
A lot of time. Exactly. So if you can approximate that in your day, whether it's through meditation or showering, or just taking some time to, in between jumping into a meeting, or listening to a podcast that actually does have a video, it can be beautiful. And then on the same side, sometimes, the beauty of voiceover protocol and live video streams is the fact that you can actually see, Obama giving a speech on Instagram. And it's just amazing to to see how humble that is, and to see how normal it is for someone who normally is dressed up in a White House to see their bookshelf. So it's not either or. It's to be open that you have a choice.
So my husband and I have listened to this other podcast, Stuff You Should Know, with Josh and Chuck, with howstuffworks.com, I think. And they've been around for a long time. We've been listening to them over a decade. They've got hundreds of episodes, very objective, and a lot of different kinds of topics. We love them. We had listened to them for probably a good 7 or 8 years before we ever saw a picture of them. And their voices didn't match what we expected to see. Like, we almost would have thought that they would have been the other way around for some reason. I don't know.
Yes.
We just had it kind of mixed up. And we actually got to go see them live two years ago today, or this week, I think. And it was kind of weird seeing their voices coming out of a body.
Yes. Well, that's how it was on the radio. You get so accustomed to this person's voice, like a deep baritone voice from a man. And then you see him, and he's like this scrawny, skimpy dude. And you're like, what? And you're like, I was way off.
Yep. But it kind of adds to it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's fun.
And sometimes you nail it. I mean, I know what Howard Stern looks like, but if you don't know what Howard Stern looks like, and you listen to his show, you might not necessarily label it if you were given 10 cards, like Usual Suspects, and says, choose who's the host. This,
Wow.
tall, scraggly, afro-y guy, you probably wouldn't pick him, but maybe you would.
So when it comes to Zoom fatigue, because that's like, I have some friends in a book club, and we've been doing Zoom book club for the last 6 months. And the other day they're like, hey, could we maybe like go to a park and like set our chairs out really far away from each other and see each other in person? And they're like, we're just feeling Zoom fatigue. And I was like, well, let's talk about that. It ended up not really happening that way. I didn't go. And but I mean, some people are just getting weary. And I don't really want to get into the politics of the pandemic and everything, but like, my husband just found out that, well, he's known for some time that they're going to do like work from home semi-permanently through the pandemic. They're still at level 0 at his company. They just emailed him and said, we're looking at, offering some of this as a permanent option for certain groups of, employees, and then hybrid for some people, and looking at it in the long run. And I was like, how do you feel about it? And he's like, yeah, it's good. But they don't do video. They just have, just like we're doing with you, just their images on the screen, and they just talk. And that's all they do ever. He's never had to be in a video meeting ever in the last 6 months. How do you think, like from your studies, what is helping people do this in the long haul?
That's a good question. I mean, there's first of all something to say about multitasking, and if your husband can do the dishes and listen to a podcast, or drive and eat yogurt and have a conversation with the kids, we're not actually multitasking. We're switching between tasks really, really quickly. Rapidly. So
he misses a lot when he's doing the dishes. He has to keep reminding and reminding and reminding and reminding.
So there's this idea in America, and it's not really in Europe, of presenteeism or even posturing. So being visible. And I think, and I don't spend that much time because I work for myself, I don't spend that much time in Zoom meetings per se. They're often safe spaces to share. There's coaching and other things. But from what I hear and what I've learned is people are overcompensating to be visible. So if you're on the Zoom meeting and there's a video shining on you, even if there's 50 people on there, you are not doing the dishes. You are probably not even on your phone. You are looking at the screen. And in many ways, what that's implicitly saying is, we don't trust you, because you're now having to be present when actually there's no office and you're in your kitchen. So why not, if it's helpful, start cutting the onions and be present and mindful and enjoy this is an argument, it's maybe an opinion. Enjoy the conversation, actively listen, and when it comes time to contribute, chime in. But if you're sitting there for 45 minutes just listening to people offload, and you're kind of starting to resent it, and you're realizing this is a status update meeting, and you'd much rather be preparing lunch for the kids because you've got a conference call at 1, now you've got emotional baggage that you're having to deal with on your own, which is why we're seeing a big spike in mental health issues.
So when I was training for a company that I started working with the English teaching stuff, my baby was still breastfeeding, and we were attending trainings, and there was an option. Like, they weren't required to have the camera on, thankfully, because then I could care for my baby and listen and watch, and eventually set the baby down, and she'd whatever, go play or whatever. But I nursed my babies a long time. But yeah, I mean, I felt like I could actually do both, because if I would have been demanded to be on camera, I wouldn't have been able to attend as many sessions, as many of these optional, like, extra, I don't know what you would have called them, workshops.
Yes, that's right. And so a lot of it is like, a lot of that is regarding, what's the best way to conduct this meeting, or what's the best way to learn. And the other one is, we're not meant to be spending this much time looking at screens. Like, that's not our natural state. Whether it's somewhere around, people have Instagram tracker, but like one of my girlfriends was like, oh, I've totally curbed down my Instagram. I'm at 55 minutes. So always under an hour. And I was like, is that good? And she's like, it's a lot better, And I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, so that's Instagram. And then let's add in your work. Let's add in Netflix. Let's add in web surfing.
Mm-hmm.
And next thing you know, you're easily at 5+ hours a day minimum.
Yeah.
Easy.
I have an iPhone. It's old, which, by the way, it reminds me, I like to keep my camera, not my camera. I like to keep the light source behind my, screen here dim.
Good
so
call.
I'm not having so much of that blue light. And
Yes.
I did get the blue blocker glasses. I'm not wearing them on camera, but if I did, they would be the ones that shine blue all over.
Yes.
But I did finally enable the screen time tracker on my iPhone. I kind of knew it was there for like a long time, and I was like, I don't even want to know.
Right.
But when the pandemic started to get really, intense,
Yeah.
and then a lot of the social justice stuff was coming out, I was like, I was literally glued to my phone most of the day, and I had things I needed to be doing.
Yes.
And I'm like, I should probably just know. And I started to put blocks on my phone. I've learned that even if I put a passcode, or if I would hide a certain app into another folder and make
Yes.
it more difficult, my thumb could just find its
Oh,
way
yeah.
there so easily, like it's muscle memory kind of stuff. And I was like, I need to make it harder and harder and harder for myself. And sometimes I just have to leave my phone with my husband and be like, if it rings, let me know.
Yes. I mean, this is going to be our, there's a wonderful book by Jenny Odell called How to Do Nothing. And it's really our one savior in an attention economy is training our brains and having discipline and knowing ourselves to say, okay, I'm going to indulge. I'm doing 10, 15 minutes of Instagram or whatever it is. And then I'm giving my phone to my husband.
Mm-hmm.
Many people have that discipline. Many people don't. And those are the people that we need to be worried about, because in many ways they're going to be quietly suffering, and the toll will come in April of next year. Pun intended with your name, but and then what will happen is, we actually have a problem here because you're hardwired for novelty, which we all are. Right. What do you have for me? Give me a shot of dopamine. Let's do this.
Yeah.
I mean, I've watched everything I've wanted to on Netflix. I watched The Octopus's Teacher, David Attenborough. I've watched Ozark. I'm done. There's nothing on there. Yet I'm mindlessly scrolling through David Letterman's interviews trying to find the Kim Kardashian one, which I don't want to watch.
You
right?
do.
I do. I mean, I'm watching it. And I'm like, I really don't want to watch this. They're at CBS buying like
why
that.
am I?
Right. So somehow the algorithm and Reed Hastings has won because they know me better than I know myself. There's it's a window into my soul. Is my
suggested videos on YouTube. They get me, or even on Facebook. Sometimes I'd be like, I literally should not. Yeah, I actually installed a extension because I do use Facebook for work purposes. I have a Facebook group, and I'm always looking for similar-minded people, like for instance, to interview and things. So I do use it with purpose, but I can also fall down that rabbit hole and be in it for 6 hours.
Yes.
And so someone told me. Maybe I read it about it in an email, productivity tips once upon a time. And just like the one thing that stuck with me was there's a extension on Chrome called Newsfeed Eradicator. And basically it uses all of the features of Facebook. It's just the same as normal. And then it blocks your newsfeed. So you can purposefully be like, I need to check in on my mom, and I'll like type in her name and I'll find her and I can look at her wall. I can see my notifications. I can use Facebook with all the features, except for I can't just scroll and scroll and scroll and scroll and scroll for 6 hours. It puts an inspirational quote.
Right.
Often about productivity.
Right.
In place of the newsfeed, I'd be like, I'm on my computer. I should be working. I can't fall into this trap right now. Later, I might indulge myself for, 45 minutes, let's be honest. While I'm whatever, watching the kids do a bike ride in the parking lot, which is something that we do a lot lately.
Yes.
I might catch up then, but.
Yes. No, I mean, the irony there is we've gotten to a point in time where there's, I've got them too, blocker apps and time tracker apps and apps to help us to stop using the apps that we have that are riddled with noise. And so that's the current state of affairs. Whereas, at one point it'd be like, well, just don't have Facebook. You're like, that's not an option. I need it for work.
Well, even if you block it, like, or not, even if you like delete the app from your phone, you can still, like, and I knew how to do this. My thumbs could just get me there.
Yes.
Go into my browser and type it in, and like, I don't even know how it happened, but I'm on Facebook.
Yes. I mean, most people came off of Facebook or migrated. Most people migrated to Facebook in 2007 and 2008.
That's me.
Yeah, me too. Actually, I was a little bit of a late bloomer. I remember my friend had a video, like a video date, like someone had sent him a video that he was supposed to go on a date for, and he showed it to me, and I was like, "What is this thing?" He's like, "It's Facebook, man." I'm like, "What is that?" He's like, "It's from Harvard. It's like this thing," and I was like, "Okay." And then I didn't do anything about it, and then like 6 months later, I was like the last person. Everyone was like, "You're basically missing the party. Like you're not there." Anyway, I stopped using Facebook and deactivated my account in 2014. And then slowly you'd hear these things of like, they did a study, a study on Cornell University students by sending 700,000 students more negative news to see how it affected their mood. And sure enough, it affected their mood. They had the Cambridge Analytica scandal, all the Russia stuff, but still there's utility in the platform. And of course, when you have WhatsApp, Facebook, and Instagram and we don't have to totally get into this deeply, all owned by the same company, sharing data, allowing for beautiful, amazing things like, civic action and fundraising and mobilizing, also has a dark side, right? Yeah. Addiction, pornography, sexting, whatever it could be. There's always going to be a double-edged sword. So it's just about mindful, conscientious use.
Right. And I live in a state away from my family. It's a 29-hour drive.
Where are you?
To go see my parents. I'm in Arizona, but I'm originally from Minnesota.
Okay.
So I understand the cold weather. You're in Vancouver, right?
Yeah.
Is that wet and rainy? Or
it's
do you guys
it's wet and rainy. You nailed. It's exactly what it is today.
Right now, most of the time. And we are sunny and hot most of the time.
Right.
But
yes.
we had a little bit of a cold front. It was like down to 63 degrees, and my kids are like getting out their winter parka.
Right. Right.
Yeah, so to drive to see my family it's a really big deal. To fly is a big deal because it's expensive. And, my husband's family is equal distance far away, and it'd be 2 different flights. And, we get to see them maybe once a year, sometimes 6 months, sometimes 18 months or 2 years. And we've only been here for almost 5 years, I think, but we just don't see them enough. And so now my grandma, who's 91 years old, is on Facebook. And,
yes.
Just things that happen that I wouldn't see otherwise. Like, I wouldn't have been in the loop.
Yes.
I've lived in lots of different states, and so I definitely know about the utility, but I also know the dark side, and it's really hard to find a balance sometimes. There's ways you can screen things and make sure that you see the people who are positive first, and, snooze the people who are less positive, which I've recently started to do a little bit more of.
Well, it sounds like you've got sort of discipline and awareness. I'm concerned about, a 17-year-old who's been sort of locked down for several months, and really their whole social life is taking place on the internet. Right.
Yeah, for sure. We have 3 kids, and we're doing online school.
Yes.
They do get to see their classmates a little bit, but even there, most of the time they only see the teacher.
Right.
Sometimes we'll do Zoom with a friend, but I'm just thankful right now that we have 3 kids.
Right.
Because right now they are each other's social life with us, and we're getting along really well. It's going pretty terrifically compared to, some of the junk that we were dealing with maybe a year ago when we were too busy, and some meltdowns more than we should have had. We're at a pretty peaceful level overall, but there's a lot to balance, and we're pretty careful about them not like getting into chat rooms, basically telling them why. Let's talk a little bit about your work. What do you do? You said you've been working from home for how long?
I was thinking about that, but when you sent me the invite yesterday. So I officially started working from home in 2003.
Okay.
I was living in London, England, and I quit my job in the music industry. And I remember I basically opened up my laptop in my bedroom on my at my bedroom desk. Like I had this desk in south of London, and I was using a lot of creative software like InDesign and Photoshop, and I had like 17 windows open. I had bought my first MacBook Pro, and I was like, okay, I can do this. And if I reflect on it, because obviously I have a revisionist history, I just sat there for like ever and never left and just worked and worked and worked and worked. I had no way of turning off because now there was no office. So my first introduction to working from home was basically working when I was awake. Like I wake up, brush my teeth, sometimes
Good
shower.
Recipe for burnout.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh, it is the recipe for burnout. So in many ways, I look at it as like I did it not so much as like an active choice. I just did it as like I'm gonna not work for this company anymore, which a year later went out of business. I'm gonna go pave my own way. And so in many ways it was exhilarating and exciting. I was 27 years old. And since then, I think I've in many ways adopted a mindset of work from anywhere, work in an environment that inspires you, that caters to your psychological, creative, intellectual, spiritual self, and shut the fuck up if you're complaining that you have to work at your kitchen for a couple hours. Like that's an amazing thing to be able to even do. So to be grateful. And now I just like, even today when I'm like thinking about when am I going to work? Where am I going to work? I'm excited about the prospect of having the ability to design my day, design my week. And that's been a big passion of mine because I did a really sort of, I had a rocky start. And I think I learned with getting the sort of scars and learnings of burning out, of not knowing that I needed to be with people sometimes when I was being so sort of isolated and stubborn. Sometimes needing a space that's not the home and a co-working space or an office and utilizing that. So yeah, it's been a long journey if I think about it. And I was also thinking about the history of homework, like not homework, but working from home.
Yeah.
And you probably know this. So the original working from home is hunter-gatherers and going and getting food. Then it's the medieval age of, woodworkers and casting irons and making swords. And then at some point it becomes the pioneering sort of creative artists in New York and in Los Angeles and London that could make their art from home in their studio.
Well, and farmers.
Like, for sure.
Yeah.
And then we got teleworking, which got a bad rap in sort of 80s Japan. And it was all about kind of, do we really trust you? Like, how do we know you're doing work? And do we have the network infrastructure to actually give you a phone? I mean, one of the studies that I found when I was writing the book was mobile technology is still totally undershadowed. So it's like stationary desktop and stationary phone outnumbers mobile 2-1.
Really? Now?
This is before the pandemic. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So like it was basically you had to go to the office to do the work because they didn't give you the tools to do it from anywhere.
It was a secure line.
Yeah.
I know, like, that was a really big deal. I used to work for Mayo Clinic in Minnesota, and everything was about, patient confidentiality. We needed to have a secure line, secure internet. And then they were a little late to the game, but they finally figured it out.
Yeah.
And a lot of people to work from home, but we were still restricted to our office. You had to work in the office with a router. You couldn't take a computer to another. You couldn't even go to another room in the house. You had to get permission to change your office setup from one room to another. You needed to get permission to move from one city to another city. They needed to, especially if it was out of state, you'd have to get permission because of tax purposes. So we did not have, like, when I would tell people I work from home, they'd be like, oh, you get to set your own schedule. And I was like, no. I am an hourly employee. I have to get permission to take lunch. I mean, it was very controlled. And I think they're giving them a lot more autonomy now with their schedule. Like I interviewed a former coworker of mine recently, and I had to work really hard to have like a flexible lunch schedule, and now that's just automatic. Maybe they took my idea and ran with it. I don't know.
Yes.
I read the 4-Hour Work Week by Tim Ferriss, and I like went and I was like, if you want me to keep working nights, these are my requests. And allowed me. So you identify more as a work from anywhere than specifically work from home.
Yeah, like, so if you think about if a company is giving a long leash to an employee, they're basically saying, be visible, be present, even if you're at home or at a co-working space or a coffee shop.
Mm-hmm.
But if you could just, and we should say that the pandemic has accelerated perhaps the whole work from home or remote working by about 5 years, at least.
Oh, yeah.
So there's a beauty there. There's also all sorts of repercussions around preparedness for it and mental health issues.
Right.
But
or equipment.
So prior to the pandemic, I was a member of WeWork. And I would go to WeWork, and I often wouldn't work. I would socialize. I would work in a different way, which is business development, knowledge sharing, cultivating relationships. So it was a social thing. My motivation to go to a co-working space was to network and socialize. Then the pandemic came, and that was sort of gone. It was like there's no need to go there because, first of all, no one's there. And we can go into the WeWork story or into co-working as a separate topic. But then it was
I actually interviewed someone that did talk about this a few episodes ago.
Okay. And then all of a sudden it was like, okay, well, my home office is now my office. So I kitted it out. I got some plants. I really made it a place that like I could go to, which was upstairs, and then kind of induce a sense of it's time to work. But of course, around the corner is the laundry machine. Downstairs is a fridge. Next door is the neighbor who just had a baby. And all of a sudden, it's sort of like, it's like a Simpsons episode or something where I'm like working from home, but I'm delusional because I'm not actually getting the great work done.
It's a big shift.
It's a big shift. So it was because, when I reflect on it, it was now the choice had been removed. Even if I had chosen to work from home, and WeWork was up the road. It was literally, it's a 10-minute walk. I had actively said, well, I'm just going to do 2 hours in the house and then I'm going to go meet that person for lunch. But now I'm not even going to meet that person. So it had been sort of invisibly stripped from me. So I started to, in many ways, not necessarily suffer, that's extreme, but I started to not appreciate that I also needed to move around. Like our bodies are meant for moving. So
that 10-minute walk was taken away from you.
Sure. Yeah. So my commute. So in effect, and now things in Vancouver have opened up a little bit more, but in effect, I have 3 stations in my house. I have the kitchen, which I love. I have the living room, and I have the office. So those are 3 spaces that I can work from home that all have a different feel. When I get to the couch, I ain't getting off the couch again. So the couch is like sort of after dinner, or it's like the fun stuff, like, podcasts.
That's not work.
It's like researchy work, reading stuff. But the kitchen and the office are two places. And sometimes my brother comes over and he knows, like, if I'm there, he knows not to talk to me. And often in co-working spaces, I often have my headphones on, which is a signal, leave me alone.
Yeah.
I have a coffee shop in Vancouver, or I don't have it, but my friend owns it. It's called Platform 7. And I wrote half of the book there. Oh. And I did so not because I decided to. I did so subconsciously because the environment in that coffee shop was just enough white noise that it is a little bit of a distraction to help me to focus. So you look around and you see some chit chat, you see some people on a computer, and you're like, aha, right, this is why I'm here. So I could do 2 hours of uninterrupted writing, and then I would burn out.
Or I can't say I had the same experience when I tried to work from. I think I would hear everything. I would actually bring earplugs.
I bring my headphones and I turn on some funky disco music, and I just I just love it. And then the coffee.
I wish I could zone out like that.
Oh yeah, and the coffee is from Portland. It's Stumptown coffee, so it's some of the best coffee I think in the world. And then it's modeled on Platform 7 in Gare du Nord in Paris. So it gives you this European kind of kind of like coffee shop Renaissance feel where everyone's, kind of crazy exchanging ideas, and there's a bookstore next door. And I didn't realize this. And then when I finished the book and I was talking to the owner, I said, you realize I probably wrote half of this book in your coffee shop. He's like, I'm aware, because you were there all the time. And the pandemic kind of changed things because, one, it wasn't safe to keep it open, so it was only takeout. And in many ways, I think the coffee shop as a model is in many ways the competition for co-working space. Like, why should I spend £400 or $400 a month?
Yeah.
When I can, if I'm only going to do, because I'm only in the coffee shop for maybe 2, max 3 hours. 2 hours is usually my limit of like focused work.
Your rent is paying for your snacks,
Yeah,
your coffee.
yeah. And you saw it all over the world. You see it in Ace Hotel in New York and in London and LA. You see it in some of the hippest coffee shops, and some of the coffee shops had to say, no Wi-Fi or no laptops for more than an hour. But many places are like, hey, listen, like, use your judgment and etiquette and come here and spend some money and do what you need to do and bugger off. So between a co-working space, a coffee shop, and home, there's no such thing for me as a permanent office. And the last permanent office I had was in 2010 in London, and my rent was like half my income.
Right.
So
I'm curious how you got from London to Vancouver. Was that a move that was because you're like a digital nomad, or was that like a permanent thing?
Well, I also read Tim Ferriss's 4-Hour Workweek, but I read it quite late. I probably read it maybe 2015 or 16. I'm not sure when it came out, but I definitely didn't read it when it came out. And I think that there's a beauty in that concept, and there's also like a dark underbelly. We don't have to necessarily get into it, but we could.
I have opinions. I do too. I mean, he's kind of a jerk sometimes, but you get the good stuff out of it.
Yeah,
too.
no, and listen, it's there's a value in understanding that work doesn't have to be this thing that consumes us. It doesn't have to be the centrality to our life. And that theme sort of came up after I finished, or as I was finishing the book, and I realized that as someone who's obsessed with work and loves it and gets energized by it, if I was religious and I had a church or a synagogue or a mosque that I visited every day, I probably would put less emphasis on work. So I'm well aware that I have used work as a place to find meaning, when the question could become, why are you looking at work in the first place? To be a place for that. But that's a whole other thing.
The social part of it and everything.
But to answer that question, I think when I was living in London and I was there for 12 years, I really was in what people call the bubble or the hedonic treadmill. I would work hard, then I would decompress, and because the energy was so buzzy, I didn't really know how to stop. I love nature. I'm here on this little island, bigger island off of Vancouver, called Vancouver Island, at a small town called Tofino, where the only activity here is dog walking, hiking, and surfing. Wow. So after this call, I'll go surf for a couple hours, and then I'll come back and work. So I didn't realize that was possible because I didn't give myself permission. I thought, like, just keep working, and then you'll make a lot of money, and then you can go and start, doing all the things that you enjoy. So, the idea of the 4-hour work week in many ways is you can retire in real time. Like you could work for 4 hours a week, drop shipping from Amazon, and live in Thailand. Like, that's an option. I didn't really I didn't really like say, hey, that's the life I want. I sort of fell into it. So from 2014 to 2018, maybe 2019, even last year, I would call myself location independent flexi worker. I went all over the world. I was in Japan, I was in Bali, Thailand, South America, and I did the work from anywhere thing. I didn't do it that well all the time, but sometimes I did it really well, and I was like, aha, this is what it's all about. And you meet people who have basically adopted that way of living. They might be more gypsy in their blood, or they might be more free spirits and just not want to be anywhere. But the pandemic has shown me and a lot of other people that the art of stillness and being local and finding ways to travel without traveling, like on a plane, is also wonderful. So I've been to lots of different places in British Columbia, which is the province where I am. I've reconnected with old friends in new ways. I've connected with the same friends in different ways. I've grown closer bonds with my family. And so my point there was, and I also got older. So my point is that I migrated from London to a new way of looking at the world as like a global village, and in many ways gave myself permission to work from anywhere. Whereas before I thought that you had to be in London to be like in business, because that's like a mega city, and that's where innovation happens. And it's true to a degree. Mega cities do have a lot of intellectual property and creative collisions and wonderful things, but you're seeing more and more of people like leaving cities or going to cities for that, and then living on the fringes, especially places like New York right now. It's like, if you could live in Brooklyn or in the Hamptons, of course, that's where you're going to want to be. And then you'll go into Manhattan when you need to. I mean, that's what I've been talking to when I talk to my friends there. So yeah, so just saying, like, this whole idea that the whole world is moving to mega cities and there's going to be 50 mega cities by 2010. It might still be the case.
2010?
2050. There'll be 50 mega cities, which is 20 million people or more, like sort of a Mexico City type, which is like a migration to the city for opportunity. Mm-hmm. But if remote work and flexible work is really taking hold, maybe that's going to slow down, or maybe there'll only be, say, 12 mega cities, and they'll just be huge, and the rest will sort of be like, people choosing nature and choosing to live, just outside.
So a good section of my audience is I've been trying to mix it up and interview a combination of entrepreneurs, freelancers and things, as well as employees.
Yes.
So the people who are, in that 9-to-5 job, or who do, work specifically for a local office where they are required to go in maybe like a half a day a week or something like that. And so a lot of people do have roots down. Maybe they have joint custody with their, ex or something like that with the children. So they can't just be location independent. What kind of things would you, I guess, another thing that I see, and I'm kind of getting all scattered now. You got my mind flowing in all sorts of different directions.
That's what I do.
But yeah, I'm just thinking about these people who are like, oh, if only I could blah, 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 travel the world and see all these things, or who are looking for jobs right now. Maybe a lot of people just got laid off and they're trying to find a work from home job right now. Do you have anything that you've learned along the way? Is your book about workology?
My book is about the changing nature of work. So it's how work has moved away from a industrial mode or mindset to a humanistic one. And then it looks at the most pioneering companies that were already officeless and or high trust cultures, such as Buffer or WordPress or Semco or Buurtzorg. And there's all sorts of wonderful companies that have innovated without a pandemic having to be the catalyst. And then it looks at the future of what possibly could be a preferable future where, humans are cherished as assets and not resources to be managed. Right. So for someone who's in a position now and things are not pretty, and they're probably going to get a lot uglier, where work is precarious or where they don't have autonomy or agency, there's some things that can be done. There's a whole body of research around job crafting, which is really just broken into 3 pillars. There's bosses that are the destroyer of meaningfulness and the people that you work with. So you have to recraft your relationships, which is really about boundary setting and doing the work on yourself, so that when someone sends you a carbon copy and you go, holy, you actually don't have that reaction. You just laugh. So you imagine your relationships with your colleagues and bosses if that's a source of pain right now. And I work with a lot of people specifically around that. I'd say one out of every 3 people that I work with or coach have someone in their organization who is often not a grown-up. It's a grown-up man-child. Right. So we just call it out, and then you're like, okay, so
or mean girl.
Yeah. And so a lot of it's managing up and all that. So that would be relationship crafting. Task crafting is the hard one, which is like, let's say you're a project manager. That's your job, but you're really good at it. And if you are honest with yourself, you have about 20 or 30% more bandwidth to do other things, but you just haven't necessarily taken the initiative, or you're really not that motivated. And so your energy should go into looking for another job or volunteering and saying, I want to be on that committee, or I want to set up Toastmasters, or I want to run a podcast, and taking initiative to extract some more value or meaning from your job. And you're not necessarily overworking, you're just managing your time well because you're delivering on your duties. That's called task crafting. And the final one is really the most important one, which is your inner world. So how does April or Jonas look at themselves and see and experience their work? There's fundamentally something going on when you're not feeling like the puzzle is aligning. So you're in the wrong industry, you're not being promoted, you're really not enjoying the day because by the end of the day, you're just exhausted and you need to take a nap. A lot of that has to do with your own coding, your own experiences, and you have control over your mind. So what's going on there? So job crafting is this whole thing. Sometimes it's helpful. Sometimes it's actually revealing to say, actually, there's no way that I can turn this job into one I love. It sucks. That's a good outcome. And then for the people who just can't leave, whether it's Minnesota or Manitoba or whatever place, I don't really have like anything I can say is like helpful to say, like, if you really want to travel the world, then you're gonna have to make some fundamental life choices. But there's usually a way to do sort of an audit around what are your values and what are the types of companies where your values can be lived or upheld, because that's super important. What are the types of skills that you have that have currency in the market and that you could double down on, and even if they're not necessarily the things you want to do, by in effect doing them well, you might turn them into your passion, or they might become something that lights you up, or you're actually in a position now of abundance or financial security where you can start to look to shift sideways. So a lot of that is find out what you're great at and do that and make that your job or your work, as opposed to be like, I want to be an opera singer. There's a lot of literature out there. I'm a kind of person who experimented with a lot of things until I landed on something, and I'm pretty aware that this is a pit stop and I'm going to find something else. So I'm one of those people who never decided what they wanted to be, and I'm going to just do a lot. And I was watching Rashida Jones last night on Netflix, who is Quincy Jones's daughter. And, she went to Harvard. She's a comedian. She's a writer. She's an actress. And she said, in my 50s, I want to become a master at something. And I thought that was quite beautiful. Like, the world is cherishing right now the expert generalists. You can podcast, you can edit, you can teach English, you can mother, you can do all of these things relatively well, really well. Why not?
People are looking to make money, though. And like right now, I'm in a lot of groups of working moms who have like a desk job at home, for corporations and things. And they just got laid off. And now they're like, the job market is crazy competitive right now. How do I find something that is going to give me the flexibility to be the mother I want to be, but, also bring in the money? And I kind of feel at a loss sometimes, because the jobs that I held are kind of like, I was a medical transcriptionist for a long time. So another story. I didn't ever want to be that. I also studied music, by the way. But that job is not a job that I can just say, oh yeah, come and be a medical transcriptionist now, because that job is like going extinct.
Yes.
You know, there are very few people that can keep that job because voice recognition technology has changed that landscape.
Mm.
And so I'm like, well, I had this good job, but I can't say that you could get it. Or, you know, even like the teaching English definitely has been affected by the pandemic.
Yes.
My teaching hours. And so it's like, do you see a lot of people shifting from, you know, 1099 or, you know, just a corporate job, salaried, hourly employee stuff to more of the entrepreneurial stuff? Or is that just too risky right now?
Well, it's a great question. The Upwork freelancer report before the pandemic predicted that half the American economy will have at least 2 employers per person in the working world by 2025. So they'll be filing on their forms, you know, like freelancer.
Oh, that they have changed. Okay, yeah.
That was the
Or that
prediction.
they're doing both.
Yeah. So it'd be like, you know, you might have a full-time job and drive Uber at night. You might
Something on the side.
be selling stuff on Etsy, doing freelance graphic design. Who knows? But you don't have one employer. So you're
Right.
in many ways a fractional worker or a portfolio worker, whatever you want to
Oh.
call it. I
Right.
thought that was really exciting. And then I read a book by Sarah Kessler called The Future of Work and the End of Jobs, Gigged. And it followed a mother who ended up becoming like a guru on Amazon Mechanical Turk. And she got carpal tunnel. She could never stop working because she always could make like 7 cents by transcribing something or, you know, converting something that was being automated, like with CAPTCHA. An Uber driver who was addicted to surge pricing and just couldn't stop because he just wanted to make that little bit
Right.
extra money.
Yeah.
And it followed the precarious nature of gig work, which is not the passionistas. This is not people who are like selling kombucha in Portland, or, you know, the barber who's doing beard grooming and, you know, whatever. These are the people who are in precarious work. They don't have benefits. And if something goes wrong, everything falls to
Month by month. Definitely.
So it got me, it sort of, I checked myself and I was like, oh yeah, like I forgot, like I'm actually in this upper echelon of
Yeah.
very fortunate, able to teach and coach and write. And it's a totally different world. So, you know, I can't speak to some of the people, like you've been saying with the moms who've lost their jobs and stuff. I can say that humans are fundamentally, more adaptable than perhaps any other species. That's why we're here. That's why we're having this conversation. That's why we're having what are we using? Riverside.fm. Like, we are absolutely incredible when you think about foresight and hindsight. So, and we can bind time. Like these mothers can see themselves with their kids at graduation and their kids having kids. So what's needed now is creativity and innovation. And dissatisfaction is the breeding ground for creativity. So it's like, I'm really pissed off with my employer. Okay, great. Be pissed off with them. Get your severance. Sue them. Do whatever you need to do and move on. Sort of like people who are always bitter about their ex. Like, you know, it's like 4 years on and they're still moaning. It's like, you know, what if you just let it go and actually repaired that and chose love and curiosity so that you could move on? So I know that sounds quite brash, and I know I might be tone deaf for some of these people, but I would say that things like Upwork, things like online teaching, things like care, home care and caregiving and coaching are all industries that can be done online and are all booming because people need that support and they don't want robots to do it. Teaching, caregiving, and coaching. I can say that those are fields that I see continuing to rise.
How do you do caregiving online? Because when I'm thinking in-person caregiving.
Oh, sorry. Well, yes, sorry. Caregiving would be frontline workers as well as apps and technology that offer support. So there's a big app right now that's had some controversy that does psychotherapy online, and all of the psychotherapists and counselors that I know, in terms of mental health, are doing online delivery. But yes, like caregiving in a care home you can't really do it online. So I should, yeah.
Right.
But like, that type of work you can still get into if you're willing.
The professional services can be remote now.
It can be
telework.
Remote. Yeah. And it comes back as well. Is this a gift or a curse. So if someone has been let go and they really, really love their work and the company is not doing well and they've been let go, it sucks any way you cut it. But if they really didn't like their work and they were just holding on before the pandemic and they were just, this is an opportunity if you frame it that way.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. When I left my transcription job, it was basically I had something else lined up. Like this whole teaching from work gig was just going to be like a little extra income to cover, say extracurricular activities with my kids.
Right.
Well, when Mayo Clinic is like, we need to cut back on how many people we have in our department, and we're going to give you the option to leave if you want, a voluntary separation package, kind of like severance. Who wants to volunteer? And I was like, me, because I already had something lined up. And I think it comes with the whole, don't put all your eggs in one basket. Try to diversify a little bit. It's nice to have a backup plan. So like you're never only stuck with one thing.
Yes. I mean, if we were in a conference right now, or we were in a room with whoever's listening, someone could say, and I'll speak for them, what are you guys talking about? Like, get a grip. Like, there's potentially going to be more unemployed workers in the world than since the Great Depression, the highest in peacetime. The debt of governments is like in the 4 trillions. It's so high that to dig ourselves out of this, airlines are now looking at 2024, 2025 as being a sense of normalcy. Like the ripple effect of this is like, I'm actually getting shivers right now as I say it. And here we are having a podcast talking about, like, should I work from a coffee shop or should I work from in my underwear? So you got to like look at, we are really a negligible amount of people who can even talk about this, who are not in factories, who are not in industries, in the service industries, that have really a real uphill battle. One is skills training and development to be employable. And not be, before it was automation, now it's just, is there enough jobs out there? Universal basic income and a social safety net to help with this. Looking at work being distributed, and maybe someone says, oh, I'll work 3 days a week now because I have some extra income and I'll actually let my colleague have that extra day. So job sharing and distributing work in a different way. And emotional labor, all the work from domestic work. I mean, the original working from home was taking care of the kids and cleaning. That's work. And so when we look at a new work ethic and we start to value what a teacher does versus an investment banker, or at least the teacher as equal, if not more impactful, then we might get to a place where this conversation has more sympathy, or probably more empathy to people's precarious positions. Whereas work from home as your podcast title, we have to go with a grain of salt here, that like either you already are working from home, or that's something you really are planning on because you believe and you're going to be determined to create a life where you have autonomy and agency in your work.
Who will benefit the most from your book right now?
Well, that's a loaded question, and I love it. The people that will benefit most from the book are leaders or emergent leaders in organizations who can affect change. They will see that the way that organizations have been structured was on a model that's no longer fit for the world we live in, and the amount of impact that they will have on their colleagues, on their bosses, on stakeholders, and even on their family will be tantamount. So that would be the most. And then those who are in transition and are kind of scratching their heads right now, or getting excited and giddy about what's in store for this new world, would also benefit, because I chronicle a lot of people who did beautiful U-turns or 180s to turn the ship around so that work becomes something that energizes them as opposed to depletes them.
So the people who can, especially the leaders, who might be able to help part of their workforce switch to a more home-based option, to give them that longer leash, right? The more autonomy, rather than like having people burning out because they're working from home. Precisely.
And when we use language like flexible work or home-based, what we're really saying is giving people the autonomy to choose where, when, and how they work. So instilling trust, and
Right.
the leash kind of gets cut. Hopefully, there is no leash anymore.
Yeah. Right. And I know that some industries are going to be a little bit more open to those than others. Some types of work are going to be more, they'll see a productivity shift in a positive direction, and some industries might not. Like I talked to someone the other day, and they said, the sales team was struggling until they got back to the office because they needed that competition.
Mm-hmm.
But the creative people or the introverts who just need a quiet space were really doing well from home. Tell us the name of your book, where we can find it, and where we can find you for people that might need your coaching or any of the services you provide.
Sure. I would say one thing about that last point. There was a company in London called the Wellcome Trust that piloted the 4-day work week. And they got very far along the way. They're like basically the same as the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And they discovered that they had 2 types of workers predominantly. They had the knowledge workers that could work from home and were doing more funding and giving of the funds to charities and so forth. And then they had the people who worked in the museum and who were actually like on the ground. And the people in the museum and on the ground wanted the hours and wanted to be present, whereas the knowledge worker type workers really valued the 4-day work week. So they found it very difficult to move completely to the 4-day work week for everyone, because there was different types of workers within the same organization. So it's quite nuanced.
Personality sought out the different kinds
Correct.
of jobs. Correct.
And different nuance based on the type of work. So, sales versus creative work, but that said, so the name of my book is Shapers: Reinvent the Way You Work and Change the Future. It's designed and it's spaced out for people who have problems focusing, like my brother and myself. So it's lots of white space, some diagrams and so forth. And you can go to shapers.life, and it has all the places you can buy it, Chapters, Indigo, Barnes & Noble, Amazon, if that's your thing. And for me, people can go to jonasaltman.com, and you'll find my contact info and how and who I coach. And I've been just really excited to talk to people like you, and I'm grateful for you hosting me today for this conversation.
This has been great. And I mean, we went, again, this is kind of turning into a trend. It's supposed to be 45 minutes. And I'm like, you know what? We're just going to blow through it all.
I know. It's good. I didn't look at the time. And then when I did, I was like, wow, we can yap.
And I really like to think of the people who are working from home, maybe who don't feel connected right now, listening to a podcast like this, to be like, you know what? I'm not alone.
Yes.
So I'm hoping that this is serving people like that who, need that connection, and to hear the stories of how people have gone through that mindset shift.
Yes.
So
yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, let's wrap this up. Thank you, Jonas. I will say this is April Malone with Yes, I Work From Home, and we'll see you next time.
See ya.
Take care. Bye.